Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fiume, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have the founder of MaidThis Franchise, Neel Parekh. Neel, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Frank. Excited to be here.
It's great having you on, Neel. So why don't you tell us what is MaidThis Franchise and how you got started?
Sure. Yeah. So MaidThis is the first and only vacation rental cleaning franchise in the U.S. We actually do both residential and vacation rental cleanings. But what's kind of unique about it compared to regular residential cleaning companies, it's fully remote. So the franchise owners, they don't have to have an office. They don't have to have vehicles, overhead equipment. None of that's very lean. And it's a fully remote franchise model using AI, automations, tech, just as forward thinking as we can be is the goal of what we do. And I started it originally back in 2013 when I was trying to escape the 9-to-5. I was working in private equity, just wanted to get out. Did that as a side hustle for a couple of years, eventually quit, booked a one-way flight down to South America and started traveling and started building MaidThis and eventually started franchising it in 2020.
So did you start renting Airbnbs at one point and see this as an opportunity, or what made you think specifically Airbnb, other than the fact that this was in the throes of COVID and the Airbnb and Vrbo business really took off once people could start, doing short-term rentals?
Yeah, honestly, Frank, I wish I could say I was forward thinking and really smart, but I wasn't. Like most things, you kind of do it and you're like, oh, wow, I don't know what happened over here.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. So when I originally started it, 2013, 2014, I was trying a lot of side hustles when I was in my corporate job. I wanted to quit and travel and help support my parents. That's what I wanted to do. So I was trying e-commerce, drop shipping, if you type in escape the 9-to-5, all these people pop back then saying, oh, start a blog and do X, Y, and Z. So I was trying most of it and it flopped. And finally, I was on Reddit, which is a great place to procrastinate when you're at work, reddit.com. And there was a post of a guy who started a cleaning company. And I thought, hey, why not? I'm doing a bunch of other stuff, which is flopping. Let me get this started. And it started working. And this was around when Airbnbs just started coming up, 2014-ish.
Sure.
And so started to get calls from people who were just house hacking. Like, hey, lease a place, I'm subleasing on Airbnb. Can you guys do the cleanings? And I realized, oh my God, this is significantly higher volume. A regular cleaning, what are you cleaning? 1 to 2 times a month. Airbnb's 6 to 8 times a month per property.
Right.
And I realized no one was doing it. So we started focusing more on that niche and started growing. And it just kind of happened. I always say you can't steer a parked car. It's hard to strategize when you're not actually in the field. But when you're in the field, you realize all these opportunities are popping up. And that's kind of what happened with the Airbnb market.
My wife and I have been in the short-term rental business, Neel, since 2020. And our experience has been that getting good cleaners and having the frontline folks is the most important, right, for the experience and having a pristine home. But finding people is always the hardest thing. So how do you guys overcome the fact that it's so difficult getting great people to clean?
Honestly, Frank, there's no way you could overcome it. I think it's like anyone in the home service industry. It doesn't matter for plumbing, HVAC, anything. The hardest part is always going to be labor. It's just facts.
Sure.
So the only way to combat that, in my opinion, is volume. And we have an acronym we use in MaidThis called ABC. Always be recruiting. Always be in recruiting, finding cleaners, asking people. Some of the best cleaners, I just been on a walk in LA and saw people cleaning a house. And I said, hey, do you guys want more work? And they said, yes. And they said, great, come on board and we'll recruit you, right?
Wow.
So it's a constant flywheel. And I think when people start approaching finding cleaners as important as finding customers, the same marketing funnel, the same amount of investment, the same amount of energy, then things start moving. Many times I think people in business think about the labor as like, oh, I just have to do it. But the fact is that's probably the most important asset we have is the cleaners. So we invest a lot of money into finding cleaners, recruiting cleaners, onboarding cleaners. Mm-hmm. And that really sets experience when it comes to Airbnb hosts or even residential homes of how they experience our service.
So besides being in really the Airbnb cleaning business, what would you say stands out, Neel, as being what makes your business unique in the industry that is, especially even in franchising, which is, flooded with cleaning services?
Yeah. It's interesting. Like people always say, "Hey, you're in the cleaning business," and I guess technically I am. And Frank, maybe you feel this way, but oftentimes in business, the number one business I'm in is the staffing business. Number two is I'm a marketing business, and third is maybe I'm a cleaning business. Right? It's almost like just happens to be what we do, but you're really in the staffing business, marketing business. That's generally how it is for most businesses you'd start. And I think a lot of cleaning companies will focus on, hey, we're a cleaning company, we do this really well, and this is what we focus on. I'll be honest, I don't think we're the best cleaners ever. Like that's something that's obviously required by the customer, and you have to execute at a certain level. But after that, my goal isn't to be the top 0.1% of cleaners. It's to be a really, really good staffing agency and a marketing agency and make things stupidly convenient for the customer. So we just do things which are, in my opinion, a little bit more new age. We don't do in-person quotes. There's an online booking form. There's a lot of automations. There's AI tools where you could just chat and book with the chatbot immediately. We make things really, really convenient for the customers. So for example, on the vacation rental side, Frank, if you have an Airbnb, we could hook into your Airbnb calendar with our software.
Right.
Anytime you have a guest checkout, it'll schedule a cleaning with us, automatically assign a primary cleaner, a backup cleaner. When the cleaner goes, they'll fill out the report. They can report if there's low supplies, take photos of any damages. That gets automatically sent over to you. Now, you as an Airbnb host, when you hear that, you might be used to dealing with mom and pop cleaners. So you have to text and say, hey, you showing up tomorrow? Like, X, Y, and Z. Maybe they're great cleaners, but it's really inconvenient to have to do that constantly. But with our system, everything's fully automated. You get charged automatically, you get reports. If there's damages, we'll send you a PDF so you could file a claim with Airbnb. It's just extremely convenient. So my focus isn't being the best cleaners, it's just being the most convenient service on the planet.
Yeah, so you really understand what business you're really in, being in the staffing business and then marketing. So many business owners, that's where we go wrong, is thinking we're in really the business of the actual product or service we're providing.
Frank, I'm curious on your end, for I-9, which is a little bit different because you're not going out to people's houses. Would you say it's the same staffing and marketing, or how would you classify your business?
Yeah, because one of the challenges that franchisees loved running the business. So early on, we had to kind of get people away from the mindset that you couldn't be the person running around on the field with, the whistle around your neck. Or if you wanted to do that, you still need to hire somebody to run the business. But the challenge for us was scale, because people would run one location of, like, say, soccer, flag football, and baseball games and say, well, how can I expand? I can't be at two places at once. So getting that mind shift change from the very, very beginning, that someone was in training, knowing that you're going to be opening 3 locations in a very short period of time, force them to think that they had to grow beyond them. Because like you said, we were in the business really too of staffing. It was all about scale. If you didn't scale our sports business, you weren't going to be quote unquote successful. You were never going to hit your numbers because you could only get so many kids at one location, right?
That's why you guys wanted them to open 3 at once, because they physically couldn't just do one.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted to force them to scale, to think bigger. And once we got people to think like a CEO, it changed everything for our business. Of course, it didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen from the very beginning. This was merely a byproduct of, people are getting stuck in the tyranny of how, and they're trying to be this master of one location, but they were never going to hit their goals if they only had one location.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And on our end, it's one of those situations, again, where I didn't foresee it, but just the way we set up our franchise system is to be fully remote from day one. I'm a terrible cleaner. I can't be out in the field. And most of our franchises are buying in because they don't want to be out in the field either. And I think, thinking back to when I started, I was working a job originally as a side hustle. I couldn't be out in the field. Eventually, I quit my job and started traveling. I couldn't actually physically be there. So there was a lot of artificial constraints created automatically. And that's why we systemize so fast. So many times our franchisees are buying in because they don't want to be in the field. We don't have any franchises in the field. From day one, all they're focused on is marketing and recruiting as the main. You remember, staffing and marketing agency, that's all they're focused on from day one. So it's interesting, just creating those kind of artificial constraints really help your business grow a lot faster.
Sure. And that reminds me of a friend of mine who actually bought a franchise specifically in a sector that he was uncomfortable doing, because he didn't want to accidentally start doing the work. So he bought a franchise in a concept that he was unable to do the work, in home services specifically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it forced him to grow out this business, and he was super successful, but it forced him to think big and to not get caught up in, well, I can kind of help out here and do the work.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's probably the key for scaling.
I think so. So what about your ideal franchise owner? Since they're not actually doing the work, hands-on, and they're not cleaning the homes, who is your ideal franchise owner?
Most of our franchisees, and it's quite a mix. We're at around plus or minus 25 locations now. Most times they're white collar professionals who either are in a 9 to 5 and want to leave. And we are a little bit unique where we do allow people to hang on to their 9 to 5 for a certain time period before taking the plunge into doing full-time entrepreneurship.
Okay.
However, all of our franchisees want to do this full-time at some point. So most of them are either first-time entrepreneurs or relatively new entrepreneurs. We don't have as many what I call portfolio investors. That's not our target market of people who acquire locations and they have a portfolio of 10 or 20 businesses. That's not typically our model. We want to work with people who really want the support system we have. And honestly, we have an incredible support system. We have a dedicated business coach, multi-pod calls, a Slack group, like just unlimited amount of support. So the people who would really value the support, I think, are the best fit for our franchises. Most of them are maybe 9 to 5. Either they hate their boss or like they just don't like the fact that they have to ask for permission for time off. They want to spend more time with their family. They want to make uncapped income. This is kind of a lot of the pain points I hear when it comes to our franchises. So we allow them to dip their toe in and then eventually go full force when they see traction start happening.
Okay. And how big are the territories and how are the territories designed?
Yeah. So it's based off the household. So a normal cleaning franchise, Frank, probably gives like 49, 50,000 households per territory. Our territories honestly are pretty large. 150 to 250,000 households is where we end up. I just don't want franchise stepping on each other's toes. So we never really oversell territories in any given market. And it's based off of households, like I said. So some large metros like Houston, it's probably gonna have multiple franchises, but other place like Greenville, South Carolina, it's probably just gonna be one.
So Neel, just because I know just a little bit about short-term rentals, because being in the business, I know that there are some markets that have a lot of short-term rentals versus others, that don't. Do you guys use any kind of third party like an AirDNA or a company that will tell you exactly how many Airbnb homes are in this territory?
It's a good question. We actually do. So it's kind of an intersection with number of households in general and also vacation rentals in the market. Now, because we do both residential and Airbnb, it doesn't have to be a market which has a lot of Airbnbs or just only a lot of residential. Often, some of our markets honestly are in suburb areas where there's no Airbnbs or there's very few Airbnbs, and it's okay. It doesn't matter. There's so many ways of making money in this business model because things get dirty all the time. One thing I will say is I get approached a lot from people who are in like Gatlinburg, Tennessee, or Aspen, and they're like, Neel, this market's going to crush. We have so many Airbnbs. No one has cleaners. This is going to be awesome. Honestly, those ones are harder because we're a staffing company first. And if there's no labor there, we can't do anything. Right. So oftentimes I like the markets which are not too dense in vacation rentals because many times that means they're like a mountain town or vacation rental town. So besides that, I always tell people I love if I see competition. They've proven out the market. They've done all the hard work. I don't have to do any research to figure out whether this is going to work or not. If there's a cleaning company there who's making good money, that's fantastic. That means we can go in there and also make good money.
Absolutely. So kind of step back for a moment. You talk about how you founded the company in 2013 and then you franchised in infamous 2020, like so many of the founders who we talked to, which I love. You grinded through, you franchised during the darkest days possible. It's going to make you stronger, by the way. You are going to be able to handle any tough road that's ahead because you started out during winter, so to speak, of the economy. Tell me about your franchise journey and share with us on what that defining moment was that you said, I've got to franchise this business after doing it for 7 years.
Man, so I think it was 2018, 2019, where I was trying to figure out how to expand. My corporate location at the time, I think we hit like around 2 million or so. And I was thinking, should we open up more locations? How do I go about with expansion? And I finally spoke with someone who said, you could either do the Starbucks model where you open new locations and they're all corporate owned, and you have a general manager in place, or you could do the franchise model. And you look at one. And I remember thinking like franchising, that's like what my parents did. That's like, old school, like, why would I franchise? But I started looking at it more and I realized like, oh, this is a fantastic way to expand. Why? Because a lot of our locations need a local presence, or at least an owner who's really focused on it and has ownership over that entity. Because Airbnb hosts need it, residential hosts need it. It makes things move a lot faster. But honestly, like leading up to it, I was never in franchising before. I was never a franchisee. I didn't know how this whole industry worked. So I was kind of like a 51% yes, 49% no. Like it could have been a coin flip. And I was like, I guess I'm not franchising. And then finally, it got to the point where I said, okay, let me give it a shot. And, it's not a cheap, okay, let's just try this. It's very pricey to open up a franchise.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of decision, and then finally decided to pull the trigger and do it. And February 2020 is when we got the FDD filed. I got the LLC and I was ready to rock. And then boom, COVID happened.
Shut down.
And shut down immediately.
And now, so you have 26 franchises open in 8 states. Over the last 4 years, you've probably had an enormous education in franchising and being a franchisor. What's maybe one of the biggest surprises you would say that you've experienced since being this franchise founder now?
That's a great question. I think every stage is so different. Like when we launched 2020, we awarded 1 franchise. 2021, we awarded a 2nd franchise. So it was very slow growth. And it's always hard. Like I think on the franchisor side or anyone in business, you look at comparisons, right? Mm-hmm. You say, well, that franchisor just sold 100 units. Like that's incredible. Why am I not doing that? Or if you're an individual business owner, that person just got to 10,000 per month in 1 month. How is that possible? It's just, there's always this comparison game. So I think the first 2-3 years of me figuring out was just a slog. There's a grind. You question yourself of like, am I doing the right thing? Why is this not going as fast as I thought it would? X, Y, and Z. And you realize there's different sets of problems at different stages. And I realize now my franchise journey is very parallel to how it was when I was starting my corporate entity back in 2013, where at the beginning, your main problem is lead gen, right? Mm-hmm. That's typically a problem. Like you're trying to get more customers in, same as on the franchise end. How do I get people to even know who I am, to inquire about me? That's the only problem. There's no use of building a support system if you don't know who you're supporting. Now that we have enough and there's kind of a steady flow of people who are coming in, same as the cleaning business, then the shift focuses to, cool, how do I make sure they're as successful as possible? Right. And honestly, I'm so happy that we did not go from 0 to 100 in 1 year. We've never worked with brokers, no franchise sales organizations, nothing like that. It's all organic.
Good for you.
And I think because of that, it's allowed us to take the money and reinvest it 100% back into franchise support. So we have a good amount of people on our actual corporate team to help out the franchisees in a big program, and we reinvest in R&D for them. And I think that's been a really fun shift for me. Mm-hmm. Is moving away from, oh my God, how do I find people to know who even we are, to inquire, to now, okay, cool, how do we just make this the most incredible support system for franchisees? So that's the current problem I'm solving. I'm sure, later on it's going to be a different set of problems, but right now it's just, let's just make sure everyone's successful and they're supported, and how do we do that the best?
That's a great insight. In that, I will tell you, I asked that question to many of the podcast guests. Not many people bring up the fact that when they franchised, they were replicating the same problem that they had when they first started their business, but it's really what happens. We think because we're franchising the business, we've got strategy licked, we know how to be successful, but you are starting over because you're starting over a brand new business, and it's
completely different business too.
Yeah. It's the same hockey stick growth where it's so slow growth, but you're right. It is a completely different business. And reality kind of hits you between the eyes when you start franchising, because you get a little cocky starting out thinking, okay, this is going to be great. Everybody's going to want to buy one from me. And in many cases, we find out, no, I'm in a field that is so crowded where there are so many opportunities. I mean, heck, there's 4,000 franchise opportunities. So it's very hard to differentiate yourself. What do you think, since you don't use brokers, you don't use an outside franchise sales organization, what's been your secret to success to selling 26? How do you sell your first dozen?
I think at the beginning, and again, this is very parallel, just like you said, Frank, for your own business or the franchise business. At the beginning, it's founder based. You are the face of the company, for sure. Mm-hmm. Let's say you start your own cleaning business, like my franchise is. If the founder, the owner of the business is the one checking in with the customers, making sure they're good, things are going to grow faster. It's just fact, right? Because there's so much more of a personal touch, there's ownership. So right now, I'm the face of the franchise. All of our leads are pretty much social media based. They either through my personal brand, through a podcast, through maybe something on YouTube that I was featured on. It's all personal brand building and letting people know it exists. And many times, as long as you put yourself out there enough times with enough consistency, people will find you. It's a crazy amount of people who said, hey, I found you on YouTube. And I don't really post on YouTube, but you get on like a YouTube black hole, you search something, you end up somewhere else, you end up somewhere else. And so as long as you're putting stuff out, I feel like eventually, people will find you and you're putting out valuable content. So for me, that's been the secret so far. And again, I don't know if we get to a certain point, territory sell out. If that strategy still holds, that's a
Right.
problem I'll deal with, I think, when we get there. But so far, the organic approach for me has been very rewarding because also it makes me focus on how do I give the most value. And many times now I'm able to utilize a lot of the things I'm teaching franchises as well as putting it out in the public. And it kind of dual purposes a lot of things and makes me grow in a different way. So for me so far as a franchisor, that's been by far the most successful is simply social media and personal branding.
Speaking of personal branding, why don't we talk about the Freedom Formula podcast that you host?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I host a podcast. I started it 3 years ago in the midst of COVID. Me and at that time I had a co-host, and we were like, hey, we both run remote local businesses, which is local business you could run completely remotely. Why don't we start a podcast? That guy, his name's David, now became franchisee number one of MaidThis actually.
Sweet.
And yeah, the podcast, it's about how to achieve time, location, and or financial freedom. So currently I interview different people who have achieved one of those different facets of life. And it's a little bit different from normal podcasts because I think a lot of business podcasts focus on financial freedom, which is great. And a lot of people want to unlock that. But I think for me, the truth is time freedom and location freedom are infinitely more valuable, right? So how do you really unlock those? And I think some people kind of crack the code when it comes to that. So I interview people who've cracked the code in one of those 3 buckets of life and just reverse engineer what they did.
Wow. I think that's really helpful in so many ways. Not only you providing just a great service to folks that can listen in, even if they're not interested in the franchise, but from the franchisor perspective, you are establishing yourself as an expert. You bring a new perspective to things, and it probably has helped more than just bringing on, franchisee number one, of course. Has it helped with awarding some other franchises?
Oh, definitely. Like, if there's any franchisors listening to this, having your own podcast is a fantastic way to let the prospect know who you are. Like so many people hop on a call would say, hey, I just binged 50 episodes and I know who you are. Let's hop on a call. It makes things so much easier. And the actual cheat code for me on the franchise support side is I oftentimes interview people who are in, let's say, the cleaning space or in the marketing space. And what I do, which is I call fireside chat, is I interview them. I let my franchisees listen in. And then afterwards, I shut off the recording and my franchisees can ask them whatever questions they want. So I could get great people on the podcast. My franchisees are supported to get one-on-one time with that expert. And you could just dual purpose a lot of things when it comes to a podcast.
Yeah. Wow, Neel, that's great. Let's talk more about the MaidThis franchise. What's the investment range on the business?
So we're what's called a low-cost franchise. So the initial franchise fee is $39,000. The all-in cost, including the initial franchise fee, is only $50 to $70. So what's kind of unique about us is, a lot of businesses you start, they want you to get vehicles, wraps, equipment, an office space, crazy amount of leases. I don't want to deal with any of that. That sounds very risky to me, to be honest. If there's a recession, if there's a COVID number 2, that's a lot of ongoing expenses for operating expenses. So we're extremely lean. After you get launched, everything is fully online, fully remote. Cleaners go straight from their home to the job site. There's no offices, no vehicles, no wraps. So most of the money after that initial fee goes towards marketing. Marketing for both customers, but remember also cleaners because we're a staffing company at the end of the day.
Okay. What's the royalty on the franchise?
6% of revenue.
Okay. All right. Sweet.
Yeah.
That's a low cost franchise for sure. And they're going to have more territory than they're ever going to be able to utilize.
Oh my God. Yeah. Especially in the cleaning industry. I mean, things get dirty all the time. Like I'm not too worried if it comes to recession because this is not exactly a luxury good. For example, a vacation rental. You have to get it cleaned before the next guest. It's not like maybe I'll get it cleaned. Like maybe I'll do it next time. It's not. You have to do it. It's a need to have service. So with that, at least for us, and maybe we could talk a little bit more about what we actually do. We have a marketing package, which we kind of crowdsource for franchisees, which covers things like SEO, social media posting. We have an AI chatbot on the website, all the email marketing, everything they need on a foundational basis. We just do it for them because we could rank really, really fast for vacation rental cleaning keywords. Just as you know, Frank, like domain authority when it comes to a franchise website is a lot better than a regular brand new domain. So a lot of times we get franchisees started immediately and they already have leads coming in. And yeah, kind of going back to what we said, we focus a lot on need to have as opposed to just want to have services.
Yeah. Well, the short-term rental business, I've been active in the community too for the last 4 years. And it always comes down to that is the number one problem that we face as an Airbnb host is having a cleaning company that provides a great service. And you're also holding your breath that hopefully they'll show up and you don't have to replace them and things go wrong. And we've been very fortunate, my wife and I, but I've been in many conferences where that comes up again and again. That's, a typical problem. Not to mention, there's more and more short-term rental hosts that have locations scattered throughout the United States. They really have a diverse portfolio. So they can't be dealing with the same cleaning company for the most part. Whereas utilizing something like MaidThis would actually give them that opportunity if the franchise is located in the same territory.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're working now on getting more national contracts for franchisees. But exactly that, we had a franchise owner or an Airbnb host who's a customer of ours in Los Angeles moved to Salt Lake City. Said, "Oh my God, there's MaidThis here. Let me just sign up with them." Because it's easy. We automate everything. We're the only vacation rental cleaning franchise that exists. So many times, like especially as we expand, it's kind of network effects. Not just with branding, but we could simply share leads because we're on a Slack channel together with other franchises. So it works out really nicely.
And one more thing, I cannot overstate this. For folks that are a short-term rental host, they're going to understand this. Cannot overstate the fact that one of the huge advantages of your business is that you offer backup cleaning services. I heard that. And here's why that's huge. Because me, as a Airbnb host, I have a cleaning company. I would love to have a backup company, but how do I tell my cleaner, by the way, I'm going to let this new cleaning company show up once every 3 weeks or something and start introducing them? It becomes difficult because I have weekly rentals. So it would become abundantly clear that I was bringing in another cleaning company where if I went to a source like you have a backup as needed, which I would never have as just an independent person.
Yeah. Frank, you're going to love this. Our guarantee is never a no-show guarantee. I think the worst fear from most vacation rental hosts is my cleaner didn't show up. Now you're scrambling. Now it's 11 o'clock. You have to check in at 3 o'clock. What are you going to do? So our guarantee is never a no-show. That's never going to happen because we have a primary cleaner, backup cleaner always. And yeah, to your point, we also allow, like a lot of ways of us getting in with hosts is we'll be your backup. Just hook us up into the system. Don't sync your iCal. We'll be the backup. We'll get everything set up. That way, if you need us, we're ready to go. Many times that does lead to us taking on the primary slot because at some point that initial cleaner might become unreliable if something happens in life and we kind of take the slot. So the way the software works makes that really, really easy.
How do you decide how many cleaners a house gets? Do you go by square footage?
It's typically square footage as well as if they do same day check-ins or not. So for example, if it's like 2,000 square feet and they allow same day check-ins, you're going to need multiple cleaners. If it's a 2-bedroom home and there's no same day check-in, you could probably send a single cleaner for that one.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. You can tell I'm asking very personal questions here. I'm thinking about my own business going, okay, here's a challenge. I got same day. My cleaner doesn't show up. Yeah. How do you do this? Okay. All right. I'm interested.
Where are your Airbnbs?
In Anna Maria Island, Florida.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Florida's probably our hottest market. I mean, 30% of the nation's vacation rentals are in Florida, so it makes sense.
Yeah, it is a great market for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Neel, what about, I love talking about challenges and mistakes that we've all made, and you've been so transparent. Would you share maybe something in the past while you were starting this out? Maybe there was a challenge or a mistake that you made early on that you learned from.
Yeah, absolutely. And Frank, I'm curious, do you mean on the franchise side or the cleaning side?
On the franchise side. I think there's other founders that they would love to hear this because we all go through challenges and we love learning from each other. So maybe there's an obstacle or a mistake that you made that people can learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on my end would be not focusing enough on the grand launch process for new franchisees. I think what worked 10 years ago for me probably doesn't work anymore. Right, marketing just moves insanely fast, and that's also what I love about the franchise business. Is many old incumbent businesses they think, "Oh, I'm getting leads; it's easy." But yeah, that's because you've done SEO for 10 years, right? And that's why. So with every new location and every year, you have to update what marketing is working because it moves so fast. And if you still teach everyone the same tactics that were working 4 years ago, it's obsolete. It doesn't make any sense. So currently, we just invested in hiring someone. We're calling it the Crack the Code Initiative. where we have 3 team members on board who are testing out community marketing tactics and new digital marketing tactics and new vendors and vetting everything with our own money for franchisees. Now, I kind of wish I did this earlier because the faster I can help franchisees get a jump where it's not just dependent on them, is going to make them move a lot faster. What I've kind of realized is when new franchisees start, there's almost overwhelm. There's too much to do. And many times people are not focused with what marketing to do. So if there's things I could do to take it off of their plate, that'll be even better. I think at the beginning I was saying, well, just do these things, like that's going to work. And then you meet 2 weeks later and you're like, wait, why was this not done? And that's my fault because I put too much on their plate.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then they leave the honeymoon period really, really quickly and they enter the grind.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's normal in any business, but you want to, the honeymoon period is artificial anyway. But yeah, there's nothing like, they leave training excited, but then once they get home, they're overwhelmed at times. And how do you eliminate those tasks? That's brilliant.
And it's kind of like, you're almost like an orchestrator. They start the business. You want to give them a very quick dopamine hit. Here's a bunch of leads come in. You feel great about your buying decision. Right. They will hit the grind phase. They will hit what I call no man's land phase, where it's like the fee stage.
Yep.
Once they surpass that, things are great and they're gravy and things are good. They'll hit another ceiling, of course, at some point, but that's later on. Mm-hmm. So the real thing to solve is how do I get them through grind phase and how do I get them through the fee stage or no man's land phase as fast as possible? I did not optimize for that until just this year. So that's what we're focused on now.
That's smart. Well, I hope other founders that are watching or listening to this show heed that warning and do the same. Mm-hmm. That's great advice. What about your vision long-term for the company, Neel? Are you thinking taking this nationwide? How big is big, do you think, for the company?
Yeah, it's funny, Frank, how much like goalposts move. When it started, I was like, I just need 5 franchises. I got to 5. I'm like, I just need 20 franchises. Now we're at 25. And I'm like, we'll get to 50, right? So I honestly, I don't have a vision of scaling to 100 and exiting to private equity. That's just not the roadmap. I worked in private equity. That's not exciting to me. I think a lot of people get into franchising trying to get to that magic 100 mark and then exit. Mm-hmm. That can or cannot happen. So for me, I love doing this and helping out franchisees and helping them escape the 9-to-5 and starting their own business and getting time, location, financial freedom. It's really fun for me. So I'm building this in a way where it's sustainable and where I am comfortable doing it long term. So I want to grow at a sustainable pace too. That means, this year we'll probably get to around 30. Maybe the next year we'll get to between 40 and 50, and we'll kind of keep growing from there. It's moderate, sustainable growth where I could reinvest back into the system and keep it going and make people happy. That's my goal, is making sure everyone is supported, everyone is achieving the lifestyle they want, and it's not too fast for people to get left behind.
Good for you. That's great. And especially coming from somebody who was in private equity before this, and not interested in selling the private equity. What's that all about?
That's probably why, because I know the ins and outs. We never took funding. Don't want to.
Yeah.
I started this business because I wanted a lifestyle business, is the truth. I wanted to quit my job and travel. I wanted to support my parents. That's it. Most people who buy into MaidThis Franchise want the same thing. They want a lifestyle business which pays them well, which allows them some sort of freedom. And I want the same thing with what I'm currently doing. We're not taking on investment because I don't want to be in a 5-year ticking time bomb. When you take on capital, you have to return that capital to your investors at some point. Your investors, the private equity fund, at some point, they want a liquidation event. The best way for them to get their money is to have you scale really fast and exit for a certain valuation. Then they could get their money, give it back to their LPs, and everyone's happy. You have a boss at that point, right? When you take on money, here's the truth. You have a boss who you're reporting to. I got into this business because I don't want a boss, right? Because I want to build the way I want to be. And I think people who exit private equity, I think that's a great play at that point. Just kind of realize what you're doing, right? Sure. Who you're getting into bed with. And I think there's a lot of fantastic private equity funds, specifically in the franchise industry, who know franchising and know brands. I think that's a great place to be. Exiting to a private equity fund who doesn't know the industry, who wants to get in and out quick, that's an easy way, in my opinion, to get your franchisees burned.
I agree. I think that's great advice. I'm certainly not anti-private equity, and I had 2 liquidity events of being involved with two different PE firms, but it's definitely not for everybody, for sure.
Yeah.
It's totally different. You do have a boss, as much as they might say we're not your boss, we're your partner. At the end of the day, if they own the company, they're the boss. or you're at least going to have to clear, major decisions with your partner.
Yeah. And I will say, Frank, I've spoken, especially in the franchise industry, like everyone's so incredibly helpful that I've spoken to a lot of people in the private equity industry in franchising, and I've met nothing but great people so far. I just think it's a little bit of a different niche, and it attracts maybe people who value that as well. And so that way I would say, be aware of who you're getting in bed with. But so far, I've only met fantastic people in the franchise industry who actually know the industry.
Sweet. Neel, you've been so generous with sharing info. I'm curious on the info that you provide to people that inquire about the franchise when they're doing their due diligence. So is there maybe a piece of advice you give them? Because you're obviously not just trying to sell to everybody that comes to you. What's maybe something that you give them as a piece of advice when they're investigating the opportunity?
It's a great question. It's funny, my sales guys get so mad at me because they're like, I turn away more people than we accept by far. And they're like, why do you talk that guy out of this? We've had over 2,000 applicants. Because I have three main requirements. Number one, does this person have what it takes to succeed? Do they have kind of the hustle gene? Number two, does this align with their expectations of what they want? We have a lot of people who are like doctors who say, hey, I earned $400,000. I want to make that money back in 1 year. And I'll tell them, I don't think this is for you, right? Just, sometimes you have to just reality check people. And if expectations align, that's number two. The third requirement is if I can't have a beer with you, I'm not going to sell you a franchise. And it could be a non-alcoholic beverage, whatever it is, but I want to make sure our community is very strong and everyone likes each other and contributes to the community. And if those are the kind of the three tenets I think about when it comes to vetting a franchise prospect. So what I tell them, the number one thing I vet is, well, why are you inquiring? Like, what are you actually looking for? And does this provide that for you? If it doesn't, I will tell you, I don't recommend you doing this. I recommend you doing something else maybe. And there's a lot of people I do that for. And the crazy part is the more honest and transparent you are, the more people love it. It's refreshing for people just to be transparent. And for me, it's great because I don't ever have to sell. I just tell them the truth.
Right.
And it's like the best sales tactic possible. So that's typically what I vet when people come in.
That's so authentic, Neel, and so refreshing. I'm glad you shared that.
Thank you.
If someone was interested in learning more about MaidThis, where would they go?
Yeah, so if you go to MaidThis Franchise, that's MaidThis franchise.com. You could go there, inquire, hop on a call, and go from there. You could also check out the Freedom Formula podcast. We're on all of the major platforms. Also, personally, I'm probably the most active on Twitter. Hop on there, shoot me a DM. I'll answer you. Just Neel B. Parekh on Twitter.
Sweet. I'm going to check out the podcast. This sounds great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Frank.
I always finish every podcast with the franchise tip jar, Neel, because the franchise community is, you alluded to earlier, is so generous with sharing and giving feedback and giving advice. So if there was an entrepreneur that was looking to franchise their company, what would be maybe a piece of advice you would give them before they go ahead and take that leap?
Oh, great question. I would tell them you are no longer in your original business. You are now in the franchise business. It's a completely different business model. Your clients are the franchisees. Approach it that way because there's almost no similarity to your current business. If you're okay with that, get into franchising. It's more of a coaching type of program, in my opinion. If you love being an operator, don't get into franchising unless you have a partner who's willing to do that.
Amen. Absolutely nailed it. I agree. Neel, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. It was so nice to meet you. And you got my wheels spinning here with my short-term rental business.
I love it. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, Frank.
All right. Thanks. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.